Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I see the participants coming into the room, so we'll just give everyone another minute or so to join us before we kick off. While you're waiting and joining us, we are almost at 150 people on the line. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. You can say your name, who you work with, where you're calling from. It's so beautiful to see just the wide variety of people coming and listening in from across the country. Awesome. Thank you so much for saying hi to all of us. Hello, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Welcome to this webinar on how to apply to the Healthy Communities Initiative. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Melanie Thomas, and I am the Vice President of Community Foundations of Canada. We are working alongside other partners as part of the Healthy Communities Initiative. Now, before we start today's session, I have been asked to go over just a few housekeeping details. A friendly Zoom reminder, you can see us and hear us, but we can't see or hear you. If you have questions throughout the session, please type them into the chat box. We'll be collecting your questions and having a question and answer period at the end of today's session. This session today is available in English and in French. To access the French and English interpretation, you will see a globe at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And if you click on the globe, you can switch between French and English. Our speakers today will be presenting in a mixture of both French and English. To begin, we want to take a moment to acknowledge and reflect on the land we reside and work on. Today, I am on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. As a national organization, Community Foundations of Canada operates across the land traditionally known as Turtle Island. The first community foundation in Canada was founded and established in 1921, yes, 100 years ago, in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Treaty 1 territory, and the traditional land of the Michif or Métis, the apologies for my mispronunciation, Anishinaabe Abewaki, and the Ochiti-Shakoven. The reality is not all, and likely not most, of CFC's ancestors built this network with reconciliation, equity, or justice in mind. In order to better understand the space we occupy, we must look at our history, the history of the land we operate on, and how our work has affected and continues to affect racialized and otherwise marginalized communities in different and potentially adverse ways. Thank you for listening. Now let's look at what we are going to talk about today. So get ready to meet some of our team here at CFC. First, Michelle is going to talk us through an overview of the program, what we saw in round 1 and the eligibility criteria. Next, Allison is going to explore some key concepts that are central to the Healthy Communities Initiative. After that, Sally will look a little bit further at some of the application process details. Finally, Alan will be joining Sally, and they're going to take you on a bilingual tour of the application portal so you can see what is involved in submitting an application. Throughout the session, our team will be gathering up your questions from the chat box, and at the end, we will have a question and answer period to answer as many questions as we can. Okay, so we have a lot to get through today, so let me pass things right over to Michelle to get us started.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Melanie. I'm going to give an overview of the Healthy Communities Initiative, what we saw in round 1, and a review of the eligibility for those looking to apply in round 2. The Healthy Communities Initiative is a $31 million investment from the Government of Canada to support communities as they create and adapt public spaces to respond to the new realities of COVID-19. COVID-19 has seriously impacted our access and use of public spaces. This is especially true in communities that are already experiencing vulnerability as a result of systemic inequalities. This initiative is funding projects that allow people to connect and access public spaces safely while still respecting public health measures like social distancing and wearing a mask. As you can see on our screen, CFC is working alongside the Canadian Urban Institute and many other partners to roll out this initiative. Round 1 had a very high level of demand. The first round of Healthy Communities Initiative was highly competitive. We received over 3,000 applications, totaling over $300 million in requested funds. For a program whose total investment is $31 million, this was an extremely high level of demand for the first round. And you're going to be able to see over 250 projects that received funding when our map goes live on the website on May 26th. Because of this extremely high level of demand, we will not be able to provide feedback on individual applications. The number of applications are just too high for individual feedback. However, if you have questions for round 2, we encourage you to reach out to your local community foundation, and the link to contact information has just been shared in the chat. Although we cannot provide individual feedback, we'd like to share with you some of the qualities found in strong applications from round 1. Strong applications demonstrated a very clear link to COVID-19. Strong innovation or newness in the project. They went beyond a continuation of ongoing programming. They serve the public or a community specifically impacted by COVID-19. They were located on public land and in a virtual or physical space that is publicly accessible. There was a clear need for the project, and the project was clearly feasible. So please keep those in mind as you kind of move through the process. Also, because the level of demand for this program was so high, many strong applications were not funded in the first round. Review committees made decisions based on the relative strength of all the applications received. If you applied in round 1 and are looking to apply in round 2, please keep in mind, if you successfully received funding in round 1, you must be applying for a different project in round 2. If you're having difficulty in creating a new application, please remember to delete any old drafts you may still have in the portal, and you can always contact our help desk if you still have problems. We'll put that email in the chat. Please remember you can only submit one application per round. If you submit more than one application, we will consider the first application submitted. So who can apply? There's a broad pool of organizations who are eligible to apply for the Healthy Communities Initiative. You can see these 4 groups who are eligible, and there are a lot of organizations under each of these groups. For example, municipalities or their agencies, or municipally owned corporations that can include municipal governments and corporations, including water management, public transit, economic development, tourism agencies, etc. Indigenous governing bodies, including a band council, First Nation, Inuit, or Métis governments and tribal councils, a provincial or territorial organization delivering municipal services that includes public utilities, such as electricity, water, telecoms, broadband. It can include community health services and economic development bodies. Federally or provincially incorporated not-for-profits, including a long list of organizations such as BIAs, business improvement areas, registered charities, not-for-profits who are federally or provincially incorporated, universities and research institutes, Indigenous organizations and development corporations, and not-for-profit residents associations. More details on each of these groups is available in the applicant guide. Community-led organizations or groups not listed as eligible here can still apply indirectly by entering into an intermediary relationship or by finding a collaborator on the project who is an eligible organization. We have a template intermediary agreement that you can use, and our equity guidance has some tips on entering into partnerships using equitable principles. There are 5 parts to project eligibility. The first is to respond to identified needs arising from impacts of COVID-19. This initiative is a COVID-19 response and should address the impacts of the pandemic. The second is to create and adapt public spaces and programming and services for public spaces in the public interest. We'll talk more about this later, but your project needs to be in a public space and accessible to the public. The third, to demonstrate consideration of and connections with the community. We'll also talk a bit more about this later, but it's important that you engage your community in the project. The fourth, to serve the general public or a community disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. So your project should either serve the general public or a group who has been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. And the fifth part is to fall within the 3 Healthy Communities Initiative theme areas. There are 3 themes of the Healthy Communities Initiative, and your project needs to be under at least one of these themes. So I can give an overview of these themes, and then on the next slide, we're going to look at what they could look like in terms of actual projects. So the first theme is safe and vibrant public spaces. Projects in this area will create and adapt public spaces or programming and services for public spaces that improve open spaces, parks, commercial main streets, and access to other amenities. These projects could adapt public spaces to help meet public health guidance, including social distancing. The second theme is improved mobility options. These projects could deliver a range of transportation and mobility options and make it easier to walk, bike, and access public transport. These projects could include projects to improve pedestrian and cyclist safety through roadway, sidewalk, and crosswalk improvements. And last, the third theme is digital solutions. These projects will provide digital solutions that use data and technology in innovative ways to connect people and support healthy communities. These projects could use digital technologies and solutions to encourage citizen engagement, use open data, online platforms, and physical digital devices for public benefit. So now let's take a look at how these themes translate onto projects on the ground. Under safe and vibrant public spaces, potential projects include purchasing equipment for temporary pop-up playgrounds to provide more outdoor options for children to play while maintaining social distance. Designing and programming a community food garden to provide residents living on low incomes with healthier food options. Creating mobile stalls for a night market festival in a public green space to allow businesses to operate safely outside. Under improved mobility options, potential projects include opening streets for increased pedestrian zones and active transportation, purchasing equipment and materials necessary to create social distancing markings on sidewalks and crosswalks, purchasing bicycles for a bike share program for residents in a community to improve connections. Under the digital solutions, potential projects include developing a virtual platform to hold town meetings to engage residents in their municipalities, creating public Wi-Fi hotspots in parks, creating a lending library with public iPads or tablets for helping seniors with the internet. These are just a few examples, and you can find many, many more in the applicant guide. The Healthy Communities Initiative will provide funding for projects between $5,000 and up to a maximum of $250,000. All budget items must be project related, and eligible expenditures will vary depending on the project. We encourage you to look into the applicant guide for more details, and it includes a list of eligible and ineligible expenses. But here are a few examples. Eligible activities are wages for additional staff, project materials, rent for projects, honoraria. This can include childcare costs, and reasonable administrative costs would all be eligible. Some ineligible expenses include buying land, a building or a vehicle, costs that relate to other projects, board member salaries, and any expenses occurring after the end of the program date, which is June 30th, 2022. Ongoing expenses, for example, revamping your website, would also be considered an ineligible project cost. You'll need to detail your expenses on the budget section of the application, which you're going to see later in the presentation. So to recap, there are three main branches of eligibility. You must be an eligible organization. You must have an eligible project. This includes the 5 project criteria: responding to identified needs arising from the impacts of COVID-19, create and adapt public spaces and programming and services for public spaces in the public interest, demonstrate consideration of and connections with the community, serve the general public or a community disproportionately affected by COVID-19, and fall within the 3 Healthy Communities Initiative theme areas. Finally, you must only be requesting funding for eligible expenses. Now that we've gone through the eligibility requirements, I'm going to pass things over to Allison to dive into more details about a few of these key concepts I've mentioned.
Thanks, Michelle. Hi, everybody. So in addition to the eligibility criteria, we wanted to share a few key concepts that you should also consider as you apply. So all Healthy Communities Initiative projects must be in the public interest by fulfilling 2 criteria. First, they must take place in public space, and second, they must be publicly accessible. So for the Healthy Communities Initiative, we consider public space to be any space owned or operated by a municipality, the provincial or federal government, non-commercial organization, or Indigenous communities. And as mentioned, who can access the space is equally important as to who owns it. In addition to taking place on public space, Projects must also be accessible to the general public or accessible to a community disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. So if a project is designated for a community disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, it must be available to all individuals in that community. So for example, if it's designed for seniors, it must be accessible to all seniors. The following are not eligible: access to services that are provided only to members or other limited lists or groups, projects that benefit only private interests, and projects that are implemented only on private property. So to recap, here's an example. A community garden for seniors located on the property of a private seniors residence would not be eligible because it is not on public land and it is not publicly accessible. Wherever a community garden for seniors located in a public park that's accessible to all seniors in the community, that would be eligible. One final concept that we wanted to talk a little bit more about is public engagement. As community-led projects, so engaging with the community in the design and implementation of projects is important. There are a few ways in which you can demonstrate community engagement. This can include digital town halls, community consultation meetings, surveys, or other stakeholder discussions. As you complete your application, we encourage you to also review the equity guidance for guiding questions on how to engage with your community and how to embed equity into your project design and delivery. I'm now going to pass it over to Sally to talk a little bit more about the application process.
Merci Alison et bonjour tout le monde. Je vais maintenant vous parler des détails du processus de déposer votre demande. Merci. Alors, cette initiative suit un modèle régional. Si vous allez sur notre site web, vous verrez qu'il y a une carte et là, vous pouvez confirmer dans quelle région se déroulera votre projet et dans quel pôle régional votre projet sera évalué. Quand vous faites votre demande, vous cochez la région où déroulera votre projet et là, ça va transmettre votre demande au bon pôle régional. Tous les projets seront évalués par les pôles régionaux, mais les projets demandant au-delà de 100 000 $ de financement, alors entre 100 000 $ et 250 000 $, seront aussi évalués au niveau national. Merci. Alors, parlons maintenant des permis et des autorisations. Dépendant de votre projet, avant de recevoir le financement, vous devez soumettre une preuve que vous avez obtenu les permis, autorisations ou approbations nécessaires pour votre projet. Par exemple, si vous voulez construire une terrasse, il vous faut probablement l'approbation de votre conseil municipal ou un certificat d'assurance. Veuillez vous informer auprès des autorités locales ou régionales de votre région afin de savoir quels sont les permis, autorisations ou approbations nécessaires pour votre projet. La réception du financement de cette initiative est un processus distinct. Alors, ça s'ajoute à la réception des permis, autorisations ou approbations exigées localement. Pour les demandeurs situés au Québec, en vertu des lois applicables au Québec, toute municipalité ou organisme public qui est sélectionné pour un financement est assujetti à la loi sur le ministère du Conseil exécutif. Les demandeurs peuvent soumettre leur demande sans recevoir d'autorisation, mais les demandes retenues doivent obtenir cette autorisation indépendante avant que le financement puisse être débloqué. Alors, au fond, la partie la plus importante, c'est que vous n'avez pas besoin des permis et des autorisations pour déposer votre demande, mais vous aurez besoin pour recevoir le financement. Et maintenant, je vais passer la parole à Alan pour vous expliquer le portail de demande.
Thank you, Sally. In this section, we're going to go inside the application portal and see what the applicant experience would look like online. To begin, if you began an application in round 1, I just wanted to let you know that that application is still saved within the portal. By logging into your account, you will have access to that as well. In section 1 of the application, though, this is the eligibility quiz. It contains the exact same criteria as in round 1. However, there are a few additional questions to make the criteria just a little bit more explicit. In this section, you will need to indicate what type of eligible organization you are, and also whether your project meets the eligibility criteria. You will also choose the subcategory of the organization that you are. So for example, you could choose to be a federally or provincially incorporated not-for-profit, and as the subtype, you would indicate that you are a registered charity. Once you pass the eligibility quiz, you will move on to the full application if you meet the system requirements. If you are not eligible, you will not be able to move forward with your application. And just a reminder that you are only allowed to apply once per round. If an organization applies more than once, we will only consider the first submitted application. In the next section of the application, you'll see that we're going to be collecting organization profile information. And so this is going to be your contact information as well as the organization's, the detail of your organization's mission and mandate, the details on how your organization engages with its community, and here you will also indicate whether you are applying as a single organization or in collaboration with other organizations. In the following section of the application, this is where we'll want to learn more about your proposed project. In this section, we'll ask you about your project title and a description of the project. You'll also indicate which of the themes your project focuses on. And these are the ones you saw earlier. And again, to reiterate them, they were public spaces, mobility, and digital solutions. This section will also have a few additional questions, including how you've engaged the community in your project design and what your outreach plans are during the project, who leads your project, what your work plan and timelines are, and you'll also get the chance to let us know who your project serves. This may be the general public, or you may be targeting a specific population. So for example, creating a pop-up playground in a park is specifically serving children. This question also has a section asking whether you have considered the permits that you need for your project. As Sally mentioned before, you don't need your projects to apply. However, you will need to confirm your permits if you are successful in receiving funding. In this section, you will have the opportunity as well to upload any supporting documents you'd like to include about the project. In section 3 of the application, this is going to focus on where your project is happening, so the location, the budget, as well as the timing of your project. As mentioned before, we are using a regional approach in this program, and so here we will ask you to let us know which region or regions your project takes place in. In terms of the timing, you'll need to indicate when your project starts and when it will finish. And on the budget, there are a few questions, including how much funding you are requesting, and we will ask you to attach your budget. Within the application, there is a link to a template budget as well.
Merci, Alan. Alors, je vais vous présenter le reste de la demande. Commençons avec les modèles de budget. Pour ce programme, nous vous fournissons les modèles de budget. Vous pouvez les trouver soit sur notre site web ou liés dans la demande elle-même. Alors, quand vous téléchargez le document avec les modèles du budget, vous verrez qu'il y a 2 onglets. Le premier onglet, c'est un budget simple. Utilisez celui-ci si votre projet sera entièrement financé par cette initiative. Le deuxième budget, c'est un budget un peu plus détaillé. Utilisez celui-ci si votre projet ne sera financé qu'en partie par cette initiative et que vous recevrez un financement d'une autre source aussi. N'importe quel modèle vous utilisez, vous verrez que vous aurez des catégories. Comme ça, vous pouvez lister vos dépenses en catégories. Alors, ceci inclut les coûts administratifs, la location d'équipement, les matériaux et les salaires pour le projet. La case jaune que vous voyez sur le formulaire, ça vous donne également quelques considérations facultatives sur l'équité pour la budgétisation, mais bien sûr, vous pouvez obtenir plus d'informations sur notre site web dans le guide d'équité pour ce programme. Veuillez vous assurer que la liste des dépenses correspond au montant de financement que vous demandez dans la demande et dès que vous avez joint votre budget à la demande, vous pouvez passer à la prochaine section de la demande. Alors, la prochaine section de la demande, c'est la section 4, c'est la section des déclarations et autorisations. Bien sûr, dans cette section, vous faites quelques déclarations, des autorisations, notamment si votre organisme doit de l'argent au gouvernement du Canada et si votre projet inclut d'anciens fonctionnaires susceptibles d'avoir des conflits d'intérêts. Vous devez également confirmer quelques éléments juridiques et indiquer que vous êtes autorisé à signer la demande. Et c'est en bas de cette section que vous allez signer la demande. Et ensuite, vous pouvez passer à la dernière section de la demande, la section 5. Alors, la section 5, c'est la confirmation d'admissibilité. On a vu qu'il y avait une première confirmation d'admissibilité, c'est la première section de la demande. Ça, c'est une confirmation un peu différente parce que ça doit être rempli par l'organisme admissible. C'est-à-dire que si vous avez entré en partenariat afin de déposer votre demande parce que votre organisme n'est pas admissible à l'ICCS, c'est votre partenaire, c'est l'organisme admissible qui doit remplir la dernière section, la section 5. Si votre organisme est admissible et a rempli la première section, vous remplissez aussi la dernière section de la demande, c'est pareil. Mais pour ceux qui sont en partenariat pour cette demande, il faut que ce soit l'organisme admissible qui remplisse la dernière section. Alors, dans cette section, vous confirmerez votre admissibilité en fournissant des pièces justificatives ou des liens. Ceci pourrait inclure des liens vers la base de données enregistrée, par exemple pour montrer que votre organisme est un donateur reconnu, que votre municipalité est enregistrée ou que vous êtes une Première Nation enregistrée. Ou bien vous pouvez fournir des documents pertinents, par exemple des documents d'entreprise ou des dépôts, ou vos états financiers récents. Une fois que vous avez téléchargé tous vos documents ou bien vos liens dans la demande, vous avez fini la section et vous avez fini la demande. Nous espérons que ce webinaire vous a été utile. Notre équipe souhaite vraiment vous donner le plus de ressources possibles pour vous aider dans votre demande. Sur la page initiative de notre site web, vous trouverez de nombreuses ressources qui peuvent vous être utiles. Celles-ci incluent le guide du demandeur, des conseils sur l'équité, le glossaire avec des définitions clés et des vidéos avec des captures d'écran où nous complétons une demande étape par étape. En plus de ces ressources, nous organisons une série d'événements appelés des séances de mobilisation de la communauté au cours des prochaines semaines. À ces séances, nos partenaires parleront davantage des infrastructures dirigées par la communauté et comment faire des demandes de financement. Si vous avez toujours des questions après toute cette information, n'hésitez pas à nous contacter. Notre équipe d'assistance serait heureuse de répondre à toutes vos questions utilisant le courriel iccs@communityfoundations.com. Oui, on serait très heureuse de vous aider avec ce processus de demande. Tout ceci dit, je veux dire un grand merci et maintenant, je vais passer la parole à Mélanie pour la période des questions.
Wonderful. Thank you all. As Sally mentioned, we are now going to move into our question and answer period. If you have a question, please feel free to type it in the chat box, and we're going to get to as many questions as we can. Team, thank you. Join me back on screen for our Q&A. Today, we will be answering questions, the general questions today. So I did see some project-specific questions in the chat box. Please email us about those. Our email will be posted in the chat box. So email us, and we're happy to talk to you about anything specific to your application. Okay, team, you ready? Okay, smiles, let's go. Okay, so the first question, Michelle, when will the round 1 results be publicly available?
Thanks, Mel. It's going to be available on our website on May 26th. It's going to be an interactive map. We showed just kind of a screenshot of what that map would look like on an earlier slide. So you'll be able to click on different projects and find out some key information about each of those and how much they received, and then in a cool map context so you can kind of see what's happened across the country. So May 26th.
Awesome. Thanks, Michelle. I might go back to you again. The next question is, can we receive feedback on our round 1 application?
Unfortunately, because we received over 3,000 applications in the first round, we are not able to provide individualized feedback. I'm sorry.
Thanks, Michelle. Okay, I'm going to go back to you one more time, then we'll give you a break. So Alan, you're on deck. But Michelle, if you weren't successful in round 1, what advice would you give about reapplying since applicants aren't receiving feedback?
It's a great question. Earlier in the slide, we talked about some strengths or some kind of commonalities we saw in the projects that received funding in the first round. Ultimately, the applicant guide is your resource. It has so much information about what the evaluators are going to be looking for. That is your tombstone information to help provide that context. And ultimately, I just want to say again that strong projects were funded, but there were also many strong projects that were not funded just because of that discrepancy in between amount of dollars and the request.
Thanks, Michelle. Okay, over to Alan or Sally, because we're going to the application portal. If I'm applying to a regional hub, is there a separate application portal for a regional hub, or where do I apply from what you showed me?
Yeah, happy to take that one. So within the portal, there is just, it's one centralized portal, for the whole program. So whether you're applying in Northern Canada, Atlantic Coast, Pacific Coast, or anywhere in between, you would just go to our one portal and you are able to submit online. That way, we will take care of routing the applications to the correct hub so that it is adjudicated at the local level.
Awesome. So, we know there's quite a few different organizations that are eligible to apply. In the application portal, where do I say if I'm a nonprofit or a charity, like where does that appear in the application portal?
Yeah, I can take that one as well. So it'll be kind of the start and the end of the application. At the very start of the application is the eligibility quiz. Up front, it is just a quick, drop-down selection to indicate what type and subtype of organization you are. In section 5 of the application later on, we'll ask you to actually provide some details confirming your eligibility, and those details can be provided either through a link to a centralized database like the CRA's list of qualified donees, or it can be done via uploads, in which case we would need things such as the budget of the organization, things such as any registration forms just confirming the type of organization they are, as well as a list of the leadership team on the project.
Perfect. Okay, one more question for you, Alan, then we'll give you a little break. If I applied in round 1 and I was declined and I'm going to reapply in round 2, should I delete my application that's in the portal? Should I start fresh? What do I do there?
Yeah, so for applications that were declined, you will actually be able to see that application from within the portal. So if you are So no need to delete the one that is already there. You will be able to create a new application, but you won't be able to necessarily, like, we can't copy that old application into a new application. If that's something you wish to do, you'll just have, as I said, you'll have access to that application in the portal, and you'll just have to kind of more manually copy and paste the details over.
Okay, thanks, Alan. A question for Allison. So on the 3 themes, can you elaborate on the safe and vibrant public spaces portion? How specific do the projects need to be in response to COVID-19?
So projects just need to be publicly accessible to all members of the community. And that can include members of the community that are disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. Of course, all projects need to be abiding by all local health restrictions. And I think I would also just mention, to kind of further describe what we were talking about earlier, another example might be, if you wanted to fund a seniors yoga class, for example, that can't take place for members of a seniors residence, for example, it would need to be something that's open to all seniors in the public, taking place in a public space. So going back to the idea that it needs to be publicly accessible, taking place maybe in a city park or on municipal land or in a community center, where everyone from the community or everyone from a specific group can attend that sort of event. And it also must be not taking place only on private property. I hope that helps.
Yeah, and going on another theme. Oh, sorry, Michelle, were you gonna jump in there? Go for it.
I was going to jump in. Just the second part of that question was, how specific do the projects need to be related to COVID-19? And they do need to be related. You should be able to demonstrate the impact that the pandemic has had and why it makes the project necessary.
Perfect. And so going on to the next theme, can you provide a bit more about the digital solutions theme? Like what is it? And maybe you can provide some examples about what it's not.
Sure, and maybe Michelle, you and I can kind of tag team this one, but I can refer a little bit about the public space and publicly accessible kind of idea in the digital context. So when you think about how you can apply that thinking around how is this publicly accessible in a digital space, it would be something like a platform, maybe a digital platform that's open and publicly accessible to the community. So one example could be a digital platform that matches delivery volunteers with seniors in rural communities who are unable to leave their home safely and can't afford delivery services for groceries, prescriptions, and other essentials. So for example, in that instance, the platform would be open and publicly accessible to senior citizens, which would be the group disproportionately impacted by COVID-19 across a rural community. So although the service isn't necessarily open to the general public, it is accessible to all people in the targeted group. So there's no membership or fee required, and it's not part of the applicant's general services. I would also add that digital projects can't consist solely of operational costs to increase or alter an organization's digital presence. So for example, if funds were going to improve a website, increase presence on social media, and to translate web pages into more languages, that would not be eligible. So it does have to be responsive to a COVID response, and again, open to the public. And I know that one's a little bit of a tougher one to grapple with. Michelle, is there any other nuance you would want to add to that?
Actually, I did a tremendous job. That really spelled it out for me. Ultimately, that's a great example of the kind of virtual platform side. The more kind of tangible physical piece of the digital solutions theme would be the examples that we provided, which is a lending library targeting those who can't have access to an iPad, for example. Again, this is not giving away iPads. This is a lending library, or having a hotspot in a park so that people can, work outside for a day or some sort of event like that. That was really good. Thanks.
And Michelle, before you go on mute, because this is related to what you were just saying, is there a preference for outdoor space projects?
I think that there isn't specifically a preference. However, given kind of the state of Canada, if you look at all the different kind of health, both restrictions, public health advisories that are happening right now across the country, the reality is some places an outdoor project might be the only one that is feasible. In other places, that may not be the situation. As we, as we get results for this, we're going to be heading into winter. For example, in the northern parts of our country, an outdoor activity may not be a viable solution. So again, it really is the context of where your project takes place, your own community, and what the effects of the pandemic currently are, and what they will be in the very near future.
Thanks, Michelle. And, and just to build on that point, that's why we have regional hubs. We rely on local decision-making to bring that local context, to make sure that, in a highly, highly competitive stream, the projects selected are going to benefit the community the most. I'm going to turn it over to Sally, because I know we have some questions coming in French. And so, Sally, I'll turn the mic over to you.
Est-ce qu'il y avait une question?
Do you see it in I sent you a couple of questions, Sally. Did you see it in the document? Otherwise, I'll come back to you. If you could check the document, there are some apologies. I knew a little bit of French 10 years ago, and now I'll just offend you all if I try and attempt it. So we'll come back. So a couple of budget questions. So I'm not sure who on the team is the right one to ask these. Is it preferred to have a larger budget project? What's preferred in the scheme of a highly competitive program? Maybe Michelle?
Sorry, I was frantically typing.
Okay, no
So the question, sorry, can you just repeat the question?
Yeah, of course. Is it preferred in a very highly competitive program, is it preferred to have a larger budget project to put forward?
Oh, okay. No, I would say no. Really, it ultimately comes down to the project you are looking to deliver and what you need. So you should be requesting the amount that your project needs to be successful. There is no preference of, a $10,000 project versus a $75,000 project versus a $200,000 project. You would, when you're writing your application, if you are requesting $200,000, you might need to demonstrate a little bit more about how this project is viable, show a little bit of research around any permits you might need. That kind of evidence will support your application, but ultimately all of the applications and the funding requests are all evaluated with the same criteria, and we don't have any kind of set targets.
Perfect. And Alan, has the budget template changed from round one?
It is the same budget template, although that said, there was a small error in the original template when it went live the first time, and so that has been corrected to so that it works, but otherwise it is the same budget.
Okay, perfect. So we're hoping it's error-free. That is our goal for our launch of round two. Sally, how are you feeling? Can I throw it to you? There's a couple questions that came in.
Je vais demander les questions en français. Alors, on a une question ici. Si on a une description de plus que 250 mots, y a-t-il un moyen de joindre un document plus détaillé?
C'est une bonne question, merci. Alors, comme Alan nous a expliqué dans la troisième section de la demande, c'est là que vous mettez toutes vos informations sur votre projet lui-même. Alors oui, les boîtes sont parfois assez petites pour bien explorer tout votre projet, mais il faut être concis, il faut vraiment préparer vos réponses avant de les insérer dans la demande. Mais notez aussi qu'il y a des sections où vous pouvez insérer des photos, des cartes, plus d'explications sur le projet, alors ma suggestion serait de très bien utiliser ces sections pour mieux expliquer votre projet.
Merci. Une autre. Est-ce que notre projet peut inclure tous les 3 thèmes? Alors, espace public, mobilité, solutions digitales.
Alors oui, c'est possible que vous explorez tous les 3 thèmes dans votre projet. Je dirais qu'au-delà des thèmes, le plus important, c'est vraiment le lien à la COVID-19. Alors si toucher sur ces 3 thèmes, c'est nécessaire afin de créer un projet qui aura un impact très profond et important dans votre communauté, c'est super. Oui, vous pouvez avoir ces 3 thèmes dans un seul projet, mais le plus important, c'est le lien à la COVID-19, de soutenir les populations vulnérables et le public. Alors, avoir 1, 2, 3 thèmes, c'est important, mais le plus important, c'est ces autres éléments.
Et la dernière, à partir de quelle date peut-on débuter un projet?
Bonne question. Alors, on accepte les projets qui ont commencé en avril 2020. Alors, si vous postulez pour des demandes rétroactives ou des cours rétroactifs, ça va, c'est possible. Alors, c'est possible que votre projet a commencé et puis a presque terminé et vous déposez votre demande quand même. Mais notez que les projets peuvent continuer jusqu'à 20 juin 2022.
Thank you. Okay, we only have 9 minutes left and there's lots of questions, so we'll get through as many as we can. Michelle, is there a PDF version of the online application that an applicant can download and work on before going into the portal?
Yes, and that is a great idea to help you prepare. So we have I believe it's a fillable PDF that you can see all of the questions. It'll be laid out slightly different just because of the kind of differences of a PDF versus the online portal. But ultimately, you do need to submit using the online application portal. If you have any accessibility issues or internet issues, and this might cause problems for you, just please get in touch with us, and we can work on a one-on-one solution for you. But ultimately, the PDF of the application and all of the questions are hosted online in the resource library for this program.
Perfect. And will this presentation and the slides be available, once we say goodbye?
Yeah. So the presentation is recorded. It's recording right now. It's going to be available in that same section. So we'll have the slides alongside us talking as well. So the whole thing will be available on the website.
Perfect. And I'm coming back to you, Michelle. Can you describe a little bit more about the equity guidance and where can someone find it on our website?
So we have been tremendously privileged to be able to work with some equity consultants specifically on this program. And we have a whole host of material available. Again, it's on the website. I'm sure my colleagues can put that into the chat right now to share. We have a lot of pieces that are geared towards the evaluation, and we also have some pieces that are geared towards you and the applicant and how you can engage with the community. And those resources, again, are on the website.
Okay, Michelle, sorry, this one might be you again. How do you apply for a project that's in multiple locations? So say it's a project that's right across Canada. How do you apply?
Yeah, so in the application portal, kind of one of the first steps, as Alan described, is identifying where you're located and also where the project takes place. So even though your organization might be based somewhere, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to be doing a project there. And you'll be able to select from a drop-down list that just says many regions, and maybe Alan, you can correct me if that's not what it says, but it's some variation on multiple regions for the project. Okay, multiple regions, that's it.
And Alan, for the website, where can someone find their regional hub contact?
Yeah, so again, I'm sure one of my colleagues can drop in the link to our kind of wayfinding map. It's within that map, you'll be able to enter in the address of where your project is located, and it will then let you know what region of the country you would be applying to.
Perfect. And this is an Alan or Michelle question. As an applicant, can I lump a variety of projects under one application?
Yeah, I'll take that one. It's a little bit of a nuanced answer. Ultimately, yes, you could submit as long as there is one central theme to all of these multiple or many projects. So again, you'll see this, that everything needs to be eligible as per the eligibility criteria and the applicant guide, but your application should have one cohesive goal that kind of unifies any mini projects. Ultimately, the maximum funding is still $250,000. And the less connected those projects are together, the more it might be perceived that this is actually just a way of going around the one application rules. So it should be one unifying theme, kind of one goal for the project, and then that might involve many different activities, I suppose.
Perfect. And Michelle, do projects have to provide free services, or can they be reduced fees that's available to whoever's using the service?
Yeah, so this is money provided by the government of Canada, so it does need to be free and accessible to all. So there would not be any fees charged for what the project itself is funding.
Okay, perfect. And so we said projects can be eligible that started back on April 1st, 2020. So can you just clarify, can expenses incurred since April 1st, 2020 be funded?
Yes.
Okay, well, this, as we're getting close to our time, Michelle, can you please repeat the strength of the round one applications that were successful?
Yes. Sorry, I'm looking for a condensed version so I don't take up too much time here. Again, this comes down to kind of the project criteria, but I'm going back here and I just want to make sure. So those strengths were a very clear link to COVID-19, strong innovation or newness in the project. So they went beyond a continuation of ongoing programming. They serve the public or a community specifically impacted by COVID-19. They were located on public land and in a virtual or physical space that is publicly accessible. And there was a clear need for the project, and the project was clearly feasible.
Thanks, Michelle. In round one, were any projects partially funded?
Yes, there were. There is a button on, or a little check mark in the application form that says whether or not your project would be okay to continue or to proceed if it only received partial funding. Again, in the budgets, we have a simple budget and a more complicated budget. And the more complex budget allows you to outline any external sources of funding you may have. And that might be a reason why you would select that partial funding is okay.
Beautiful. Okay, last question for today. Of course, if we did not get to your question or you have a project specific question, please email us directly. We are happy to talk with you as well. There is frequently asked questions or an applicant guide in our resources that will hopefully answer a lot of other questions that you may have. But my question is, if I'm an applicant, when can I apply?
Now. You can apply right now. So the second round application period started on just this Friday that went by, and it's continuing until June 25th. We'll put the exact dates in the chat so everybody can see it. But yes, the time to get started writing is now.
Awesome. Thank you all. Thank you everyone so much for joining us. I hope that you found this session helpful. Please apply. We have been amazed at the projects that we received in round 1. We look forward to seeing the projects that we receive in round 2. And I hope everyone has a beautiful day. Thank you.